Welcome to Aura Talks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Aura Talks again. We are at episode 2, and I'm extremely pleased today to have with me as a guest Jonas, my dear friend and partner in crime. He's been with me on the Aura journey on this project since day one. So I couldn't think of anyone else to have a conversation with regarding the background of Aura and how it's developed over time. So Jonas, you want to give us a short introduction?
Well, yeah, sure. So thank you for having me. It's always good to talk to Dan Be, my dear friend and partner in crime. So introduction, yes, I should not get dry. So yes, I'm Jonas. I think some of you know me, some of you might not know me. I live in Korea. I like to call myself Hanganam, which is for those who speak Korean, Hanguge Namja, Ghana Namja, you know. So I'm from Ghana, and I've been here for like 6 years, going to 7 years now, and I love Korea. So that's why, me and Dan Be are sort of good friends.
Okay, so thank you for that short introduction. I always have this joke that Jonas is an African man with a Korean soul. I think that's one of the reasons why we get along so well. But let's start on the timeline at BIEN 2019. That's one of the second times we met. We went to Hyderabad where there was the World Basic Income Congress, and we spent, I think, 3 to 4 days, I'm talking about from 9 to 7 p.m., talking, hearing, and discussing UBI, Universal Basic Income. And it was a very transformative time for us because we got many different perspectives on UBI. And I think towards the end of that Congress, we both had this feeling, okay, I think UBI in its essence is great, but we definitely need to switch it up, especially when it comes to incorporating FSM from Science Walden and also introducing a new virtual currency in aura.auroville. So that's where we began. But before we go into the Aura, I really would like to ask Jonas, who's been at Science Walden for many years. He's temporarily on leave, but what is Science Walden, Jonas?
Oh, that's a really deep question because Science Walden has a lot of layers. But Science Walden is essentially a convergence project, right? And so the beginnings, well, if we want to talk about the roots of Science Walden, it comes from 2 books, right? And so B.F. Skinner and Henry David Thoreau. So Henry David Thoreau wrote this book called, Walden, where the name comes from. And I forgot that for a minute, from Science Walden. But anyways, so Henry David Thoreau wrote this book, Walden, where basically he's advocating for, a nature-centric life. He wants people to go back to living with nature because at that time, there was the Industrial Revolution and they were cutting down trees, they were building all these railroads. And he's like, man, we really need to think about how we're damaging the environment and we need to go back and connect to our roots. And, Walden 2, which is from B.F. Skinner, advocates for, science's involvement in creating a better life. Now, some people consider that book a dystopia, but, I think it's played it's played a really big role in, the development of science and, psychology and sociology. And so basically what Science Walden is taking these 2 ideas of like a nature-centric life where, people have to really connect to nature and understand that we're doing so many things wrong at this point with climate change and all these other things. And also looking at how science can help us create the society that we want to see because, of course, there were a lot of problems, right? And so one of Science Walden's, let's say inventions or one of the ideas that we've come up with to tackle many of these issues in the world is FSM, which is basically tackling, the idea of money. And so that's where, the whole idea of FSM comes in.
All right, Jonas, thank you for that very thorough introduction on Science Walden. I would like to read a short excerpt that B, our previous guest from episode 1, wrote about Science Walden and also about Feces Standard Money, FSM. So he wrote, the Science Walden Institute is based on the application of sciences to the value of community, ethical and ecological living. The vision is for a way forward out of the current evolutionary crisis where 3/4 of the global population is endangered by deprivation. Currently, only 25% of the human family is relatively well off. Giving value to what is produced by every human being but rejected as waste, aka feces, shifts the paradigm for a value that can provide a basic income if the concept also incorporates other commodities also considered waste, surplus, free, underutilized, or unusable. So this is kind of the premise of FSM and Science Walden. So I also would like to take one more minute to read a short excerpt that Professor Joe, the head of Science Walden Center, wrote on Science Walden being a new movement forward. So he wrote, "The economic crash of 2008 resulted in much discussion worldwide about the basis for our ailing and failing economic systems. I'm not a politician or a street activist, but I'm an engineer, a maker and shaper of things. So I choose to make my attempts through this lens. I wanted to look again, not just at the ideas of alternative currencies and modes of local exchange trading system, but at the very basis of money as a signifier. I felt that the creation of a new form of currency of exchange, a virtual currency, based not on an atavistic desire to create wealth, but from a basis in altruism. It is clear here in Korea and across the globe that threat and the language of shock have failed almost entirely to change behavior. I wanted instead to design a system that could encourage collectivism as a movement for change. In recent times, money and the acquisition of money has become, it seems, an end in itself rather than a signifier of value. For many, this has undermined our belief in money. So perhaps it's no surprise that at the same time, democracies have also been called into question." And one more excerpt. "When money becomes a primary signifier and driver for our lives, as it ultimately does within any capitalistic society, we will tend to make choices based not on the health of our neighbors, friends, and family, or about the health of our planet, but solely in monetary terms. It's cheaper to purchase fossil fuel energy rather than renewable energy. It is cheaper to purchase a car with a combustion engine than one powered by renewable electricity. It is cheaper to purchase mass-produced food of poor quality and with questionable environmental credentials than food grown organically or with responsibility to the soil and the planet." So this text, which Professor Cho sent out to the entire team at the end of the year, it was definitely a boost of motivation for, I think, Jonas and me, because we've been working on this project for quite a while. And I think you reach a point where you feel semi-burnt out. It's the end of a year, it's the beginning of a new one. You're thinking, oh my God, I need a break, I need to get a distance. And for me, reading this text really helped me to, just realize, okay, what it is we're trying to do.
Very uplifting.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Cho. Jonas, could you just dive into FSM, which stands for Feces Standard Money? Because we're going to get into, as the episode progresses, we're going to talk more about the Aura, but FSM is the major inspiration for Aura. So break it down.
Yeah. And so, I mean, FSM, which is short for Feces Standard Money, right, is basically this concept that's supposed to help us to reimagine what money really is. I think if you listen to what Professor Cho, actually sent out, you realize that there are systemic issues with our economy and how we think about money. Like money has become something that's scarce, and it feels like, you need to always work to make money. You need to always be in a constant search. There's never enough of it. But then, when you look around, it's like we live in abundance. There's like so much around us in the world, right? There's like trees, there's food, there's so much. And if we could just share more, if we could just, be more collective, then probably, all these problems that we have with poverty, like economic inequality, all these things could have been solved. And so basically, I think what this whole thing started at looking at what around us has value and, is abundant. And so then the first idea was, feces, because feces has intrinsic value. You can, in a sense, because you can use it to make, energy. You can use it as fertilizer for your crops. And so it's like, this is great. And there's so much of it. Why don't we use it as a basis for, a new monetary system, right? One that everybody can participate in because everybody, in a sense, produces feces every single day. Well, maybe give or take, but so that was the whole idea behind Feces Standard Money, right? To create this new currency, which is not supposed to, uproot whatever currencies we have, but to serve as a complement, right? In this world, to help us to share more so everybody can participate in this new economic system. And so basically that is, the philosophy of FSM.
Exactly. Just to paraphrase and to knock it down. Oh, first of all, for people who don't understand or not familiar with the term feces, it means poo, or more crassly put, shit. Because some people they're not familiar with this kind of scientific lingo. So yeah, let's just break it down into the really nitty gritty, like it's shit. And for everyone who understands, it's poo.
It's shit money. Yeah.
It's shit money, exactly. But why feces? For me personally, what I was so fascinated with was pooing, going to the bathroom, is something that every living being does. It's not only exclusive to humans, but also to animals, right? So I thought that was so powerful that every person or every entity or every existing being has to do this process, and to be rewarded for pooing, it's something that I think no one has ever thought of. So yeah, so one of the members of the Korean Pavilion in Auroville read this article that was published on Science Walden and FSM in Korea, and that's how the bridge was built. So one of the members, shout out to my dear mother, Hye Jong, she's one of the coordinators at the Korean Pavilion. She reached out to Professor Cho and his team, and that's how this bridge was built, right? So then our first task was to understand, okay, is there interest in the community about FSM, about like creating a new type of universal basic income? So that's where we started. So I think right now, Jonas, we can move on to the mechanisms of the Aura/FSM, because I think they have these same mechanisms, right? As in there are maybe some philosophical discrepancies between the two, but the essence, how it works, the functionalities are the same. So let's break it down. Number one, what do we have?
Well, so first of all, everybody gets 10, whether Aura or, Ghoul. So for those who also don't know, Ghoul and Aura are basically the same thing. They're just from one parent, but just different names. And so Ghoul is basically the unit of account of FSM, and Aura is Aura.
Aura is like the unit of account for, let's say, circular basic income.
Like circular basic income, essentially. And so on this platform, usually what happens is everybody who signs up receives 10 credits, which we can say Aura or Ghoul daily. And out of this 10, you have to share 3 with other people on the network. You can decide to share that 3 among 3 people, 10 people, 100 people. That's your choice. Yeah. And also, your Ghoul or your Aura depreciates by 7% daily. And basically this is, a system that's been put in place to, incentivize spending and also to disincentivize hoarding, because we know how some people are. We believe that once it's abundant, you can spend it as much as you like. And so if you also don't need it, then you lose it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, great. So we have these 3 pillars. We have the unconditional daily endowment, we have the daily depreciation, and the unconditional sharing, right? So again, to break it down, the reason why we have these 10 auras as unconditional endowment is because we want to manifest the vision of universal basic income, which is based on the idea a human should be given help or certain means to cover their needs, or the fact that they're just human, not for working, not for because they're poor, not because they're, let's say, ill. So it was that. So this was definitely one of the reasons why we felt like this was a form or an offshoot of universal basic income. And second, daily depreciation. Can you just elaborate on why 7%? Because I think this is
Well, 7% was an arbitrary number. But when we do the math, what happens is that at the end of the month, you lose all your Ghoul from that particular month. And so the whole point of it was because people are very used to the concept of, monthly salary. And so you could think of it like that at the end of every month, whatever you're given depreciates, because the math just works out like that. But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. The whole idea of, because we have some questions of like, why 7%? Why not 8%? Why not? It's not really about that. The whole idea is really to encourage people to look at money different, and not to feel like they need to hold on. Yeah.
And that brings us to the next point again, unconditional sharing. And I think one important note to make here is that this is all operating on a virtual platform. So we have platforms like Facebook, Instagram, they're social media platforms, but this would be also virtual. It'll be on a digital reality, and people would sign up and they would all interact with people on this platform or this network, right? So anyways, the reason why unconditional sharing, so 30% of your 100%, so 3 out of your 10 auras or pool has to be shared, is important because there is a systematic deduction. So if you don't choose your peers, let's say I join and I don't choose it because I'm out of laziness or out of not being in touch with the philosophy of the platform, it will just be disappeared into thin air. So it was really important for us to really highlight this aspect of connecting with others in the community, not only for sharing, but for really human interaction. Because even in a niche community like Auroville, I think I personally meet new people all the time. So I think it was a matter of like, okay, so let's try to connect with others on this network too. So yeah. Now that we have the mechanisms, which are the same for Aura and FSM, I think it's a good point, Jonas, for us to discuss what is the difference. Why did we call it Aura? And why didn't we just take FSM, which is a philosophy, which is a mechanism, which is a platform, and just inject it into Auroville? Like copy paste.
Yeah. We could have done that, but you know, I think it was circumstances. And so going back to, you know, BIE in 2020, we were like really hyped up, like, oh, we're good to change the world with this. And then we came back to Auroville, you know, we had a couple of meetings, had a couple of workshops, and we realized that there needed to be some sort of reconceptualization and recontextualization, you know, for different communities. Because first of all, right, the name FSM, some people found quite difficult to understand. Secondly, some of the terms, because it's a Korean project, right, like Google and some of all these, they're pretty hard to pronounce. Yeah. Of course, we got
Googles a lot.
You know, some people call it Googles and whatnot. And then even in the community, I think the main thing was that in Auroville, there was a resistance and a barrier, because for us coming from, you know, the capitalist world, it felt like this was the solution. Like, this is what the world has been waiting for. Yeah. And so we're going to deliver it to them. But in Auroville, where, you know, there's already a culture of sharing, and Auroville is already working towards a cashless, you know, community based on, you know, the mother's teachings. You know, here it was like, okay, we like this idea, but why do you have to why do you have to bring money back into it? Because we've realized that money is the problem. And so we're trying to, you know, just let go of money totally. And you're bringing us the solution that still has money in it.
Yeah.
And so I think that was where the biggest issue was. And so then we realized that it's still something that the community needs, because of course, there's still more that Auroville can do. And there's still a lot that FSM can do in Auroville, but not in this particular state. And so then we needed to make a few changes. And so then maybe you can elaborate on the changes.
For sure. I think like Jonas said, we definitely needed to change up the language, because every language, like, you know, every country has its own language for a reason, because every country has a different set of values and different set of attitudes. So I think the language really embodies that. I always bring this example when it comes to comparing more Western languages to, let's say, the Korean language. Korea, we say 우리 집, 우리 엄마. So we say our house, our mom, or come to my. We never say come to my house, 내 집에 와. No, you say 우리 집에 와. So again, it's really like highlighting the collectivistic attitude in society, right? So anyways, I think for that reason alone, it made sense to contextualize the entire, let's say, language lingo of the platform to Auroville, and hence Aura. It just sits right. People are familiar with it. Aura was an attempt, like an alternative currency attempt by B, our previous guest. It was actually a physical currency. It wasn't adopted ultimately, but still we wanted to give that a rebirth because people were familiar with this, you know? But for me, I think why Auroville had a difficult time adopting FSM was because they're like, okay, everyone agrees that money has value. Not money, sorry. Poo or feces has value, because we described it. We're like, okay, we can make this type of resources with feces if you put it into a right process, right? Nobody argued that, because Auroville, its agricultural sector, has already experimented with compost toilets and creating value out of poo, right? But then they could not understand, okay, if there's no like high-tech toilet to turn this feces into these different great resources, like why do we need to call it Feces Standard Money? Because yes, we agree that feces is something that can be like useful. Nobody argues that. But then I think everyone got stuck on the toilet. Everyone is like, okay, Science Walden has come up with a quite high-tech toilet, which they do have at Science Cabin, which is their, you know, headquarters, so to speak. But it's not going to come to Auroville due to many technical reasons. It's hard to maintain. It's like, I mean, just even the equipment alone might not be able to like be acquired in India, etc. So I think that was the main reason. And like, I remember, Jonas, we had so many questions about why, like if there's no toilet, like why, right? So I think I want to highlight here with this, the maybe philosophical difference when it comes to Aura and Feces Standard Money. I actually wrote this like a side-by-side column. So I would say, again, GOOL is it's a unit of measure for FSM, and circular basic income is the like Aura for circular basic income, right? But the symbol of value for FSM is feces, and I think everyone can agree. So with the toilet or without the toilet, it's a symbol, like what their brand is, what their value is feces, right? I think Auroville, we kind of zoomed out of that. We weren't just only focusing on feces, but more like all types of underutilized resources. So it wasn't, we didn't have one symbol of value like FSM, but rather we went under the assumption, okay, there is abundance. And what type of abundance we have, we need to kind of explore together as a community. So I think that's where the major philosophical discrepancies lie. What do you think, Jonas?
Exactly. I think that was essentially it. In Auroville, just because the whole issue with, they felt like the toilet had to come in if it's going to be called Feces Standard Money. Of course, in Science Walden, we did not feel that the toilets were supposed to always go together with it, because we felt that people always knew the benefit of feces, even if it's not generating energy from like a biodigester and a solid oxide setup. You know, people know that you can use your feces to plant. And so even if you're going to be growing one crop in your backyard with your feces, still something that, you know, still has that value. And so for us, we felt very strongly about that we wanted there to be, you know, that oneness and that wholeness of the concept. But of course, at the end of the day, we're trying to get to a place where people really rethink what money is. And I think at the end of the day, coming to Auroville and finding these, you know, sort of barriers and these obstacles also taught us a lot, because then we understood that, okay, maybe we might not be able to take this everywhere as it is. And so for sure, I think that is definitely the main difference of, you know, Aura looking at abundance from just the concept of, you know, there's abundance everywhere, and that anything you can give feeds into that concept of abundance. For us, we're like, okay, feces is that symbol of abundance, and so take that, you know, and so take that and then run with it, you know. And so those are definitely the two differences.
And I think it's also interesting to note that if you look at the FSM platform and the Aura platform, there was also a slight difference in the type of offerings that were put up, right? So I think on the Korean platform, there were more, I think there was a heavier focus on like on physical tangible goods, whether it be food or items. So items of various nature, right? Which is great, because everyone has, I think, a certain surplus of something on their shelves or in their shack. So it makes sense. I think in Auroville, what was so interesting to see was there was a lot of human initiatives or human-based talents or skills that people wanted to share, right? Whether it be going for walks together, that was one of it, going to the beach together, reading poems together, or so many different things, or just very human-based interactions, which I thought also spoke volumes about Auroville as a community, because it is a small community of around 2,000 to 3,000 people, right? And I think everyone in Auroville is itching for a platform on which they can get to know others and just get together and do cool stuff. So you could really see that. So I think for me, when I started seeing the types of offerings coming up on the Aura platform, I saw, okay, you know what? The highlight of this platform is not necessarily exchange or transact like a bazaar. It's not that. I think the highlight is connect. I mean, and then from connecting, I think the natural result is different type of actions like exchange, like transacting, right? So it was really interesting. Just even, okay, so getting to the timeline now of like the project, how it's developed over time. So we started with phase one. We'll really go into it really in like concise details because there's so much to say for each phase. But phase one was about going into the community. Okay, here is UBI. This is what UBI is. And this is FSM. And this is what FSM is trying to do. What do you think? So it was a really presentation-based mode of like asking the community, okay, what do you think? And we got some positive feedback, but I think like the majority of feedback tended to be negative because they really had this negative knee-jerk reaction from the term money. They're like, no, we don't want money. The mother said that we don't want, like she wants a moneyless or cashless society. But either way, we bit down our teeth and we thought, okay, you know what, we have to still continue because change didn't happen overnight and people are never open to change. It's not only Auroville or every different society on earth. I think it's all about packaging or refining the concept so that it resonates with people, no matter how good the idea is, because nobody is going to argue that this platform is going to do good. Nobody. But you need to refine it in such a way that people take it in, right? So that's what we did during phase two, because phase two, by the end of it, we wanted to launch the Aura platform. So we would have made the aesthetic changes, like the name changes and the logo changes, and then we would have the beta version given to us from the Science Walden team, because this was going on parallel in Korea. And we did a lot of community-wide, community-targeted like field activities. So we held a lot of different workshops, most notably the Unfold Your Skills, which was really trying to foster this idea of giving more than taking, right? So like giving more back to the community than instead of thinking, oh, Auroville needs to give me this, Auroville needs to give me that. We're like, no, we are all a bunch of people that have a lot of talent, that have a lot of skill sets. Why can't we learn to share that with each other, right? So we did those workshops and then we did a lot of different things. And ultimately we had the Aura Fest at the end of the year to just launch the platform. And Aura Fest, do you want to describe what Aura Fest was a little bit, Jonas?
So yeah, I think Aura Fest was basically a real-time simulation of the Aura platform. And so basically that day, what we planned to do was to get people a feel for how the platform would actually be once launched. And so that day we had actual like paper money that we printed out. And so everybody who came in got to receive some amount of that money that they could.
Yeah, like 10 physical note auras at the entrance. Exactly.
That they could go in and spend. And so, you know, it was really great. And then they could also share, just like how we do on the platform, you have to share with, you know, 3 other people. And so you'd have to go in and find 3 other people to share with. And it was really great to see how people really took that on and went in and shared. And then people also had spaces where they could offer, you know, something, or they could also sort of access some offerings from other people. And so people would be offering smiles for a couple of Aura, they'd be offering hugs for a couple of Aura. And it was a really, really great feeling to see this materialize in real form, because sometimes when you're working on projects like this, and it's always like, you want to see it happen, and when are you going to get people on the platform? Like, when are we going to launch? But this, it really showed us the potential, and it was really beautiful to see how the people really, I think we had like 500 more than
like definitely a few hundred for sure.
Which was great, because I didn't expect that at all. For me I was like, oh, are people coming? I thought
it was going to be 50 people tops, and I was like, okay, thank you everyone for coming.
It was really beautiful.
It was. And so just to add a little detail to the process was, so you get the 10 physical auras, you enter, you have to share it with others, and then you have a special booth, which is called the offering space. So you have like the sticky note, right? And you write down the things that you want to offer and value it in auras. Of course, when it's like a real-time exchange and you don't really have time to prepare your offerings, it's much more like, you know, I'll give you a joke, or I'll give you a massage, or I'll give you this and that. But there was so much of that interaction, so much laughter and joy, especially from little kids. Kids had a ball. They got so creative with it. I mean, I think kids are the most thrifty, like honestly.
They were like, they definitely were very thrifty with it. I mean, it wasn't a kid's whole idea, but still it was great to have them come in and still offer stuff. You know?
I think like the kids are the hope to any future generations, and honestly, they just constantly remind us to take things lightheartedly and have fun with it. Because I think even with us, at a certain point, we got to a point where we realized, like, this is not fun anymore. Like
Yeah.
all this creativity and aspiration, inspiration, it was like dissipating by every second. We're just like getting drained. And I think Aura Fest for both of us, I speak on our behalf, I felt like, okay, you know what? This is fun. Like this has some real potential to bring people together. Yeah. So what happened was we launched and we had the beta version, but there were certain like bugs, not bugs, but let's say missing features. For example, we didn't manage to create a notification system. So let's say when somebody booked an offering on the Aura platform, right? A notification wasn't sent to that person, to the actual receiver or to the offerer. So then we had the situation where the cycle of offering was not complete, right? So because people are not going to log on to this platform every day, every hour, being like, oh, is anybody taking my offering? You need to have a notification system for that. So there was definitely a halt, so to speak, in like usage and adoption. And then what happened? What happened, Jonas, to the world?
I mean, Corona hit.
Corona. COVID-19, the most talked about topic. Yeah. I'm so glad we went half an hour without talking about Corona at all. This is a
it almost came up though. I was like, no, let me just leave that for later.
Thank you for stopping that urge. Yeah. But yeah, so we had a little break between the months of February and March. Also, we took some time off in January, and now we're back at it, and we have a new roster of team. So we have more tech-based people. So we have people working on graphic design, UX, user interface, and UI. Designer as well as an app developer who are all in Auroville. I think this is really important to mention because, of course, when you're looking for tech people, you really want to gravitate to these big cities because there are people who are so experienced in these fields. But we wanted to make sure there were people in Auroville who really wanted it for the community. So shout out to Shitej, Ribu, and Rima. They're three wonderful people that are so invested in this project and to bring something like this to the community. And honestly, they've been a source of inspiration to me since I began. Because every time I talk to them, I ask them, are you going to stay on long enough? Because like if you leave after 2 months, like this is not good. Like I can't do this alone. And they're like, no, but we want to see this. Like we're in it for the long haul. So I want to thank them for that. So now what we're going to do is we've made some necessary changes to the current platform. And so that it's functional. So we're going to send out an announcement to the user base. And the second step is like in the coming months over the summer, given the restrictions and the lockdown period, we're going to have a lot of time to work in parallel on a newer and more improved platform. So we're going to give it the domain. It's quite a catchy domain. I'm proud of it. auranetwork.app. So I thought it was cool. We're going to be working on that. And hopefully we will have a good version by August. So that's the plan. And then we launch it in August again. And then the next 2-3 months we'll be spending on obviously communicating to the members and say, okay, there's a new app out there. So yeah, so that is what we're doing. But I want to ask you, Jonas, what you think of the term social sharing network, because this is what we're trying to really focus on phase 3, right? We want to incorporate social element as well as a sharing element. So what, like as a person who hears it for the first time, like what do you think of it? What do you make of it?
I mean, I think essentially this is supposed to be the evolution of social networks. I think
we have the word evolution.
I think that's what essentially it's going to get to, because now what we're taking is now we have a lot of social networks. Like you have Instagram. People are just sharing, photos. Some people get to monetize, not everybody, but I think this takes bits and pieces of all these other ideas of, our need, the human need for connection and for, community, and now tries to put in, this idea of money and of exchange and of, connection. But then I think what this looks at is more like, how can we still be able to change how people are thinking about community and how we're sharing with each other, but then in a more fun way. It's not as because I think the old platform, even though it was great, it was still very rigid, in a sense, because it was like, just come on, put something on, and then share it with somebody else, and then share some money with them. But I think what it's missing now, just because of how the world has progressed and how we're really hooked onto the whole idea of social media, by taking these little aspects of social media that really gets us to be so, focused and so committed and, so engaged, And then now building on top of that, this idea of community and being able to share with each other and being able to, create a better welfare system and being able to, just help all of us improve. I think that would be like a bomb platform. I personally
For sure.
think it's going to
It's
be
really,
like
you said, like it's an evolution. It's definitely a hybrid of two things, right? Because social media is something that's very well established. And then you have also well established online bazaars like eBay, obviously, Craigslist, and you have Fiverr, which is a very interesting example. It's for human resources and human skill sets, right? People are not selling like items on Fiverr, but they're people, graphic designers, coders, poets, God knows what, they offer their services on Fiverr. So then you have like on both sides, on both columns, you have very well established models, but we are yet to see a hybrid in between where people come on this platform, A, to connect with people, but B, to not like sell stuff, because selling has this connotation you want it for monetary gain. And yes, you do get a monetary gain because you do offer an auras and you do earn auras, but it's not for the sole purpose of like, oh, we want to sell because we want to earn, but more like, okay, we want to offer you, and hopefully that covers a very useful need for you. And on top of that, I also get certain auras with which I can cover other needs. So I think there is a very distinction. There is like, of course, it is still the selling and earning, but with a more collective and more, not altruistic, but more human approach, in my opinion. So yeah. But I really wonder, I've seen over the years working in tech, working in this very fast-paced environment, so many good ideas coming to place, and you have talented people all over the world, and they come up with very good apps, very good websites, and they flop in the end. Like they're not adopted. And ultimately, the goal of any platform, right, any app, is to provide convenience and comfort to the users of real value, and by default, then a network, right, because you have a network of users. So what do you think could be, so to speak, the major hindrance to the social sharing network, aka Aura platform, that's taking off?
I mean, there are usually why startups fail. There's like a myriad of reasons why startups fail. One of the biggest is timing. I think that's like one of the biggest issues, because sometimes some ideas are great, but they're way ahead of their time, and I think that's
yes.
And I think, looking at the times now, right? Now we could probably talk about Corona, because looking at the times now, right, it seems that there's definitely a need for, something different, a need to think about the system that we've built, because we can see how so many countries have suffered from, the economic collapse that Corona has brought. America, Ghana, like Corona it doesn't know your skin.
No discrimination. It's honestly like a very modern citizen.
It's like, yeah, that's what it is. And so I think at this point, people are really starting to look around and ask if we've actually been doing this wrong the whole time. Do we need more community? Is this a time for us to be more collective? Is this the time for us to look out for each other? And so I think for sure, timing is very, very important. And these times call for, measures like the Aura platform, that is going to provide a means for people to still be able to stay afloat. Because imagine if, like this platform was working, was up and running around this time when people are losing their jobs, when people can afford to, feed their kids. It would have been a great lifeline, for so many people around the world. And then I think it's definitely something that's needed at this point, and I don't think it's failing. I mean, just because I'm a supporter and I feel really good about it. So, yeah.
I agree with you. The reason why I chuckled when you mentioned this whole like timing thing was because I just got transported back in time, and I was doing a presentation at one of the Auroville schools, and one of the teachers said, I don't want to do an accent because I don't want to impersonate people, but let's say the teacher was like, yes, we tried this out in the Soviet Union. We tried something out like this, and I honestly had to laugh because, first of all, from a technological perspective, was it possible? Did they even have internet back then? And anyway, so I just thought it was so funny, and I couldn't agree with you more. There's this wonderful word in German called Zeitgeist. directly translated, it speaks about the soul of a certain time, it like a spirit of a certain time. And I think personally for me, we got into UBI quite late. I mean, it wasn't like something we researched early on in our academic careers. It's something towards the end for both of us. So we went to the BIN Congress. We're like, wow, this has been around for a while. There's been researchers and activists working on this for decades, not like 5 years, 10 years. They've been on the block for a while.
Yeah,
and for us to come,
the guy standing.
yeah, no, guys. so for us as like newbies and amateurs to come to the scene, and then the next year Corona happens. Like honestly, I don't want to say I'm happy Corona happened. I would never say that because people are suffering. There's a lot of public anxiety and fear, and humanity should never be living off fear and anxiety. But what I will say is COVID-19, the outbreak thereof, has forced us all to really question these very well-established systems, namely the economic system. What is money? Why do some people have so much money? They have helicopter pads and mansions, while other people are living on the floor, on dirt floors in a keep. It's something that you don't necessarily question unless you're the one suffering, right? Mm-hmm. So I think what's interesting, living in a developed country like Germany, which is one of the most developed countries even in the EU, you read things at a distance. So when you're reading current affairs, you're like reading the terrible things that are happening in Ghana, terrible corruption, hunger. I mean, there's the whole joke on African hunger, whenever you're not finishing your plate, you're like, oh, their kids in Africa died, right? But then everyone reads it. People are very well informed in Europe as a whole, but it's always at a distance because they're not suffering. They're not the one losing. They're not the ones without a job thinking about tomorrow, how am I going to feed my kids? So for the first time in a long time, these Western countries that have been so prosperous for a long time, or like prosperous, like with certain limitations, they're being forced to question, oh my God, like I feel the pain, I feel the suffering. And I think that's one of the main reasons why this zeitgeist is really going to carry this platform forward. So for that, I honestly feel very blessed to be part of this research and this entire project at this point in modern history. This is going to be something that our future kids are going to talk about, So in the history classroom, probably it'll be all digital. They'll have like digital classrooms with like holograms and whatnot. So they're going to be like, in 2020, there was. So it's going to be one of those things. So I'm so glad that we are part of this. So yeah. One thing I also wanted to ask, it was a very interesting question. So one of my friends is visiting right now. So I was talking to him about the platform and just the mechanism of the Aura, FSM, everything. And he brought up a very interesting point. He said, don't you think that something of this nature, as great and innovative as it is only functional or successful in a closed loop? Closed loop meaning like a very small community. Because the way he explained it is, okay, so in a closed community, it makes sense because you're so idealistic and you're very collective, right? But let's say you step out into a city, into a big city like Berlin, London, all the metropolitan cities, and if you could offer on two platforms, one on the Aura platform and one on the normal economic market, and on the economic market, you can earn a certain type of money, aka fiat money, that will give you access to so many other things. As opposed to on the Aura platform, you earn auras, or on FSM you earn gold, and it's only exclusive to this network, right? So he said in the long scale, what's going to incentivize them when you're part of a much larger network or a much larger space to like go for our more altruistic or collective platform? So what do you think about that, Jonas?
Well, I mean, I think those are very difficult questions to answer because essentially we don't know. But what we do know, right, is that there's a need for this. Now, of course, once people are okay offering in a small, tight-knit, group, in a niche group, then it means there is a possibility that, because of course, imagine like we weren't friends, but then we met and at some point we became friends. Yeah. And so I think for us, that's why it's not like, oh, there's a solution that we're trying to go dig up from someplace. It's like, this is what we're trying to use to bring, these changes that we want to see. Because if the changes were somewhere that we could have just brought on, we would have. But then we're really trying to use these ideas of Aura and FSM to look at how through exchange and through these connections, right? As people constantly practice, because you become by practicing and by doing. And so we want to use this as even if it's in a tight, small niche network and it's just between you and your kids at home, and you even start using Aura, it doesn't like you can still do stuff, because I think that's one of the main things of like how there's some areas of our lives that we think that we cannot use money for. Like you can't pay your mom for feeding you. It's just kind of weird, but you can always show gratitude with Aura. It's like, Mama, I'm giving you 10 auras for the food being so good.
Thanks for this roast chicken. It's so good.
I would send HJ some aura just for giving me, Hedgehog some aura for giving me good roast. I'm not paying her because, the aura comes from a different place. It doesn't come from the same place as, as regular money that you have to go work for. And so I think that's what we're trying.
For sure.
So that's what we're trying to do, to look at how we can use these or complementary currencies to start to get people to think different about money. Yeah. And so they can expand, their horizons and not see somebody in another part of the city as the other, but, as one.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Like Jonas, honestly, always think this guy is such an entertainer for everyone watching. He is just such a funny guy. But the reason why I mentioned this entire idea, like, okay, in terms of the scope, right, can it ever go global? The reason why I brought this up even very early on in the project, because it hasn't even gone local. So why are we talking about regional or national or global? It's because you always, when you're driving, you need to know, like, even let's say when you're driving from West Coast to East Coast, you need to know you're going to East Coast, right? Of course, in between, you're going to have so many different cities and towns you're passing through, right? And you're going to sleep in some of these cities, and you're going to rest there, and it's going to take time, but you need to always have a global vision. And I think that's the reason, because Professor Cho and the whole Science Walden team, they really do perceive this to be something that could be of global nature, that network points, each with its own contextualization and different aesthetics and lingo, can have access points around the world, right? And the more access points, no matter how local and no matter how niche, the more it grows. It kind of networks, that's how it grows, right? You have one network, and then there's another network, and then there are more network, and then that's how it grows. That's how I feel like anything in life gets spread.
Just to add to that, I think for sure, just so other people, the way the platforms were thought of was that everybody in one local, like access point can still go to some other places and still use their auras. And so it doesn't matter if you're in Korea or you're in Auroville or you're wherever, you can still move to another place. And so then you can even be able to access intangible goods, like intangible services. Like I can be here and get Dan Be to proofread my thesis for me in Germany because, because you can. So I think just that idea really is very powerful, and looking at it and having this vision and the hope that we can build this together is really
for sure. And I also want to, because I kept on shouting playful before, sorry for interjecting, but it was with the hopes of highlighting that this currency, this new virtual currency, it really gives a lot of room to play around, because it's so unconditionally received, right? You don't have this this pressure to earn more of it, or this pressure to be without it I can't survive, right? Because it's unconditional. That allows, so for example, a funny example, when we're in Auroville, we were putting things up with the beta version, or the platform just had launched. We're like, okay, Jonas, we gotta get on it. We gotta walk the walk now. We've been talking the talk. So we put a couple of different things up, things that we brought from our respective countries. And he put something for 20, or it was like an entire bathroom set. You have the soap dispenser, you have the soap holder. I mean, it's the shebang. And meanwhile, I'm putting a packet of Haribo, so gummy bear sweets, for the same amount of auras. And I'm like, Jonas, why do you have to do me like that? But what was wonderful about that was, why not? Everyone, I don't think anyone will ever be so scrutinized for valuing their offering, because it's such a subjective process what value is. Me, I value my iPhone less than a tin box I've had since a kid. There's this tin box that I have. It has all my just these very essential little things that I grew up with. So that $10, if it were to disappear, I would cry. If my phone disappeared, I'd be like, oh my God, now I have to spend X and X money to buy it. So it's just a dread feeling, but it's not actual of sentimental value, right? So my point is, subjective valuation is very important, and to give people the freedom to do that. So whether you value your offering, the bathroom set for 20 auras, and my Hari goes for 20 auras, it's fine. I think everyone should have that freedom. So again, it's just this playful playground, getting back to the beginning of what we said, of us being more like kids, being curious, being open. So that's, I think, what Aura platform is trying to achieve.
And
so,
people got all your Haribos. It was really hard for me to find someone to buy bathroom set.
Because I know what the people want, Jonas. I know what the people want. Okay, so we're gonna conclude very soon. I want to mention one thing. In each of these episodes, I'm going to try to incorporate things from my daily life, things that I've read, things that I've like heard over a podcast or reading, whatnot. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the host was diving deep into the concept of loneliness. And what's so interesting, she described loneliness as something that you can get immune to. So in the sense that there are a lot of introverted people who are like, oh, COVID-19 lockdown, that's easy peasy lemon squeezy for me. But it's so interesting. She described loneliness as something that you can get so used to. But the human beings, all at the core, because you come from another human being physically, you're born from another human being, everyone has that desire, that very intrinsic and such natural desire to connect with others. But others they get immune. You know, like some people eat spicy food even though it's not good for them because they're so immune to it, so they don't feel the acid reflux and they don't feel the burn because the body got so accustomed to it. And so loneliness is from a mental and more sociological perspective, that immunity. So it's really important to give people the access to a platform that's not only superficial, because if you have social media, it tends to be very superficial because it's based on likes and like instant gratification, instant validation. But if you, on top of that, put this sharing and actual physical interactions, because a lot of these offerings, right, are going to require face-to-face interaction, we now have an additional layer, right? So we're not only doing this superficial instant gratification, but more so we're like, okay, we're gonna get to know this person. We're not just going to at distance glamorize or really admire this person and their profile. We're going to actually interact with them and see who he or she is about. So just to wrap this up and say that loneliness is something that everyone deals with, and we really hope that this platform is something that can bring people together to share, to really help each other. And that's, I think, honestly, the only hope that Jonas and I had coming into this. Even as young people who are quite clueless in the beginning, we are still quite clueless a lot about how this is all going to play out, but we are still, we're keeping strong. We're keeping strong.
Yeah.
So we want to wrap up by saying thank you, because I think it's very important to express verbally your gratitude. So thank you to Professor Cho, to Dr. Chai Kim, to Dr. Mijin Che, as well as all the other team members at Science Walden for their guidance and continuous support. This project continues to be supported by Science Walden, which is supported and funded through the National Research Fund of Korea. So in a way, we have to extend our gratitude to Korea as a country. Thank you, Korea. Very proud to be from Korea these days. And of course, we want to also extend our gratitude and appreciation to the Auroville community members who supported us from day one, to our wonderful team, everyone part of this team. So yeah, thank you for tuning in. I really, really, really appreciate all your efforts to just question and give us feedback. So we're always open ears to whatever you have to share. Jonas, do you want to add anything?
Well, I think that should be it.
Perfect. So we're gonna plug in.
I think I definitely want to say a huge thank you to the Science Walden team as well for their understanding. I think it wasn't easy moving forward with the project, because there were a lot of times when both sides had to figure out if that was the right direction. But of course, if you want to make change, sometimes you have to take the hard decisions. And
For sure.
I think the project getting here took a lot from both sides, from Auroville and from Science Walden, and I'm really thankful for Auroville and Science Walden for how
I agree. One of the most beautiful metaphors I've ever heard about human conflict is the following. I think my mother, shout out to HJ Haejong again, she said this to me once. She said, human beings, when there's conflict, it's like rocks in like this tumbling machine, right? Like rocks with really rough edges. So it hurts when you crash, but it makes a lot of bangs and noises. But through that like constant tumbling process, these rocks get refined. And that's how a lot of rocks or like stones are polished. So that was really interesting. So for me, sometimes, even if I have conflict within the team or, with other teams, I always think, wow, I'm learning a lot through this, and so is the other person. So I really see it as that. So we are just going to take 30 seconds to plug in our social media accounts right now. So please follow us on Instagram at aura.auroville. And we're going to also have a Facebook. And I'm not sure if that's set up yet, but we'll definitely put it in the description. And yes, thank you everyone for tuning in. We always say ciao for now. So 1, 2, 3, ciao for now, Jonas. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Ciao.
Aura, the value we create together.